As you're caulking around your house, you may come across a situation where you have a large gap that you need to fill, but you're not quite sure how to do it. There's really two good options in this situation, and I will break down both of those for you now. Your first option is to grab your caulk tube and gun and come up to the crack, and you can just, try and fill that gap in as much as you can with caulk. There's two factors you're going to have to consider here though. The first, how wide of a gap are you dealing with? If you're dealing with something that's 1/4 of an inch or wider, this option is not going to be the best. If you try and squeeze the caulk in, you'll notice that it will kind of like mound up as it dries, and it doesn't look right when it is completely cured. But the other factor you have to consider is the depth of the gap that you're dealing with. If this goes pretty far back, you're not just putting caulk at the surface, you have to get it back inside of that gap as well. And caulk's not inexpensive these days, so you want to use as little of this as humanly possible. Which leads me to one of my favorite options, number 2. Frost King makes the polyfoam caulk saver, and this comes in various sizes. This is 3/8 inch in diameter, this one is a 1/2 inch diameter, and this one is 5/8 of an inch. So if you have a large gap down to a little bit of a smaller gap, these can work very well in this situation. The whole purpose here is you take this caulk saver and you're filling the gap with as much of the foam, which can act as insulation around something like your windows, and less caulk. So more foam, less caulk, it's a little bit more cost effective, and these things are not expensive. When you pick out the size of the foam that you're going to use in the gap, you want something that's big enough to fill the gap, but not so big that it protrudes out of the gap, because when you caulk, well, if it's sticking out, it's just going to force your caulk out. It's going to look super weird and you won't be able to finish it properly. Pick a size that's going to fit all the way inside that you can push in, that'll give you a nice strong base for your caulk to adhere to, so that it can fill the entire width of the gap and only go a certain depth in the gap to the top of the caulk saver. For the gap that I have, I'm going with the 3/8 inch size. Once you have the size selected, just cut it to length so that you can get it inside of the gap. Now to get the foam inside of the gap, I like to use a putty knife in order to push it in. You just don't want something that's too incredibly sharp, so you have to be careful with the corners on the putty knife, but you don't want to poke holes through the foam. If you want it for insulation purposes as a part of a section around a window, just keep that in mind. Once you have that in place, now you can just caulk right over top of it. The putty knife helps to get that foam in the gap very easily, and you really just want to work your way down from top to bottom or bottom to top, whichever is going to be easiest for the situation that you're in. But once you have it in there, you can caulk right on top. Now this is not the most clean initial caulking that I've ever done, because with that polyfoam behind it, you just want to make sure you get enough caulk in the gap so that it is filled. But once you smooth it out with your finger or with your caulk finishing tool, it's going to look really good at the end, as you can see here, top to bottom. This polyfoam makes a big difference in filling gaps like these. But maybe you're trying to figure out, what caulk do I need to use in the first place? And for more information on that, click or tap on this video. And until the next time, keep doing it yourself.